In the early hours of February 16, 1944, the Allied forces at Anzio, Italy, were bracing for a massive German counterattack. The beachhead, established just a few weeks prior, was still precarious, and the troops were exhausted from constant artillery bombardments and skirmishes. Amidst the chaos, a small team of clerks and typists worked tirelessly in the headquarters of the Fifth Army, processing a constant stream of orders, reports, and messages. One of these clerks, a young private named James, was responsible for transcribing radio messages from the front lines. On this particular morning, James was working on a message from the 3rd Infantry Division, which was dug in on the outskirts of the beachhead. As James typed away on his machine, his fingers flew across the keys with a practiced ease, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the package he had received from his family just the day before, and the news from home that his sister was getting married. In his distraction, James made a small mistake, a typo that would change the course of the battle. Instead of typing the hold position, he typed fall back. The message was meant for the 3rd Infantry Division, but it was intercepted by the Germans, who were frantically trying to decipher the Allied plans. The German commander, General Eberhard von Mackensen, was a cunning and experienced leader, who had a reputation for being able to read the minds of his opponents. When he received the intercepted message, he knew that he had stumbled upon something significant. He immediately called his staff together and began to analyze the situation. The Allies, it seemed, were planning to fall back from their positions on the outskirts of the beachhead, which would leave a gaping hole in their lines. Von Mackensen saw an opportunity to exploit this weakness and launch a decisive counterattack. As the German forces began to mobilize, the Allies remained blissfully unaware of the typo that had set the wheels in motion. The 3rd Infantry Division, still dug in on the outskirts of the beachhead, was preparing for another day of skirmishes and artillery duels. But the Germans had other plans. At dawn on February 16, a massive artillery barrage descended upon the Allied lines, followed by a wave of infantry and armor that threatened to engulf the beachhead. The Allies were caught off guard, but they refused to give up. The 3rd Infantry Division, despite being vastly outnumbered, held its ground against the German onslaught, buying time for the rest of the Allied forces to regroup and counterattack. As the day wore on, the battle raged across the beachhead, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. But the typo had given the Germans a crucial advantage, and it seemed as though the Allies were on the brink of disaster. However, in the midst of the chaos, a small group of Allied soldiers stumbled upon an old Italian farmhouse, which had been converted into a makeshift command center. The soldiers, led by a young lieutenant named Tom, discovered a cache of German documents and maps, which revealed the enemy's plans in exquisite detail. The document showed that the Germans were planning to launch a final, decisive assault on the beachhead, which would begin at dawn the next day. Tom and his men knew that they had to act fast. They immediately contacted headquarters and relayed the information, which was then passed on to the rest of the Allied forces. The news of the impending German assault sent a shockwave through the Allied ranks, and the soldiers prepared for the battle of their lives. As the sun set on February 16, the Allies were bracing for the worst, but they were determined to hold their ground. The next morning, the Germans launched their final assault, but the Allies were ready. The 3rd Infantry Division, now reinforced with fresh troops and ammunition, held its ground against the German onslaught, while the rest of the Allied forces launched a series of counterattacks that pushed the enemy back. The battle was fierce and intense, with both sides suffering heavy casualties, but in the end, the Allies emerged victorious. As the dust settled on the beachhead, the Allies began to assess the damage. The typo, which had seemed like a minor mistake at the time, had almost changed the course of the battle. But it was the bravery and quick thinking of the Allied soldiers, combined with a healthy dose of luck, that had ultimately turned the tide. James, the young clerk who had made the mistake, was never told about the impact of his typo, but he knew that he had played a small part in the battle. And as he sat at his desk, typing away on his machine, he couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the war held, and what other small mistakes might change the course of history. The Battle of Anzio was a turning point in the war, a moment when the Allies finally began to gain the upper hand against the Germans. And though the typo was just a small part of the larger narrative, it served as a reminder that even the smallest actions can have far-reaching consequences. As the Allies pushed on, eventually breaking out of the beachhead and beginning their march towards Rome, they knew that they had overcome a significant obstacle and that the war was finally beginning to turn in their favor. The Typo, once a source of chaos and confusion, had ultimately become a footnote in the larger story of the war, a reminder of the power of human error and the importance of perseverance in the face of adversity. As the Allies continued their push towards Rome, they encountered increasingly stiff resistance from the German forces, who were determined to hold onto the city at all costs. The 3rd Infantry Division, now battle-hardened and experienced, led the charge, with Tom and his men playing a key role in the advance. They had been tasked with securing a crucial road junction, which would give the Allies a vital route into the city. But as they approached the junction, they came under heavy fire from a group of well-entrenched German troops. Tom knew that they had to act quickly to secure the junction, and so he made the decision to launch a flanking maneuver, hoping to catch the Germans off guard. The plan was to send a small team of soldiers around to the side, where they could attack the Germans from an unexpected angle. The team, led by a seasoned sergeant named Mike, set off towards the German position, moving stealthily through the underbrush. As they approached, they could hear the sound of German voices and the clinking of equipment. Mike signaled to his team to get into position, and then they launched a surprise attack, catching the Germans off guard. The fight was intense, with bullets flying back and forth, and the sound of grenades exploding. But in the end, the Allies emerged victorious, securing the road junction and paving the way for the rest of the division to advance. The news of the successful maneuver was relayed back to headquarters, where James, the young Clerk, was typing away on his machine. He was still unaware of the significance of his typo, but he had heard rumors of a major battle taking place on the outskirts of Rome. As he worked, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, knowing that he was playing a small part in the war effort. But little did he know, the Germans were not yet ready to give up. They had been secretly planning a counterattack, one that would catch the Allies off guard and push them back. The stage was set for a dramatic showdown, one that would determine the fate of Rome and the outcome of the war. The Allies, confident in their recent successes, were unaware of the storm that was brewing. But Tom and his men, now seasoned veterans of the Italian campaign, were about to face their toughest challenge yet. The Germans, led by a ruthless and cunning commander, were planning to launch a massive counterattack, one that would push the Allies back and give them control of the city. The battle was far from over, and the fate of Rome hung in the balance.